made a few years later, like Factum 1 and 2 of 1957, we get with Rauschenberg a resuscitation of the Duchampian ready-made, where now the ready-made is the canvas, the sheet of paper, drawing itself, the tire, and even, as we noted a moment ago, the expressive stroke of the paintbrush, the way in which we can even see the drip as ready-made or already made. So just to remind you, here's Duchamp's bicycle wheel of 1913, his bottle rack of 1914, and the bottle rack again, along with what he called the traveler's folding item, which is the cover to an Underwood typewriter. Both of these deliberately photographed to capture the shadows that they create on the wall behind them. Years ago, when I was still living in Chicago, I happened to be in an apartment that had one of these just on the floor in the living room. And I was immediately struck by it, as you can imagine, and I turned to the owner and I said, "Oh, a bottle rack, a bottle drying rack." And he looked at me and he said, how did you know that? How did you know there was a bottle drying?" He says, "People come, they never know what this thing is that I got, this thing that I found in a flea market, you know?" And I said, "Well, I know something about modern art, Duchamp, or having the ready-made. I mean, I'm not even sure he knew anything about Duchamp or the ready-made, but so he had a ready-made and may not even have realized it." So, you know, think of the applications of the knowledge we are acquiring. Ready-made, meaning what? Already made, not needing to be made, but instead simply encountered, and often randomly and by chance. The aleatory, as I was describing it earlier in the tutorials. Perhaps that's the only way in which an encounter can happen. The true nature of an encounter is that it's random and by chance. The ready-made is the thing selected, existing now as a ready-made, may be understood as a material, object, trace, or index of the event of the encounter. You see the point? The point is that Duchamp had an encounter with any number of ready-made things in the world, but he also saw the ready-made itself, once taken up and selected by him, as itself an indication, index, or trace of the encounter itself. Almost like a souvenir, right? So the ready-made is very much part of an understanding of art as event instead of as representation, in which, unlike the spatial and temporal specific actions and events of Abach's painting, in which the autographic trace is understood to reaffirm the presence and power of the artist, here in the work of Rauschenberg and his predecessor, model Duchamp, there is the sense that the artist ego exists as nothing more, and I'm repeating my point here again, right? Nothing more than a material residue or trace, and is no more or less durable than any signature, tending as it always is to running the risk of being erased, and therefore also needing to be retraced again and again. Sort of like the shadows in the photograph. This included a sense of the work, Rauschenberg's work, right? For instance, the white paintings. John Cage referred to them as airports, where all kinds of images and things, dust, things that you might see, whatever, that they were really open, right? That this was not about the emptying out and void but instead a renewal of the painting surface so that all kinds of things could possibly move across it, like at an airport, and accumulate there. And this is where, of course, the great American art historian Leo Steinberg refers to Rauschenberg's works as flatbed picture planes. That is, like the flatbed of a truck or of a printing press, they are horizontal surfaces upon which a whole variety of different, seemingly disparate and unrelated things can accumulate, right? So the argument has been that Rauschenberg made the radical move early on, around 51 to 53, to clear the surface, always understanding that this is not empty, but is itself generative, right, of all kinds of images and things. And from there, it was an easy step to these kinds of works in their accumulative effect. So again, to repeat, works such as this, there was a sense of works like this as a surface of exposure, open to constantly changing and shifting chance encounters, and as a plane across which a variety of random things might be accumulated, either temporally and ephemerally, like shadows, or in a slightly more permanent fashion. And this is what Leo Steinberg referred to as the flatbed picture plane, a way of describing the picture plane, the picture surface, that he found in Rauschenberg's work from around 1953. With that, Steinberg believed we, as a culture, civilization, had encountered the first major shift in pictorial surface since the invention of one-point perspective by Leon Battista Alberti in the 15th century. And he said this marked a shift from a classical, traditional, pre-modern, Renaissance notion of pictures, pictorial surface, image, tied to nature, and the interest in seeing the picture plane as a window, as a frame, as a access to the natural world. He saw Rauschenberg's flatbed picture plane as a shift from nature to culture. And in a certain way, from our vantage point today, we can see the flatbed picture plane as the very early glimmer of what we now all know as that screen surface of accumulation of images and text that seems endless in its ability to accumulate, right? Which is the computer screen and the internet. A precedent might be found in Duchamp's last painting from 1918 entitled Tu me. Right? The title is T-U space M apostrophe. Does anyone know what how to decipher that? Yes, how so? Explain.
So, the idea of I existing, the term I, not really exist without the observation of you, and so I also points to you, and you points to I, and they also
Right.
refer to the same purpose.
Right. You understand that? You have to understand that that's a truncated phrase. It's an incomplete phrase, right, in French. Tu, tu, meaning you, the familiar informal form of you, tu, right? And then M apostrophe, the M for the shortened version of moi, for me, with the apostrophe, typically there would then be a verb following that, so that it would be, the phrase would be completed as you something, whatever verb, to me, right? And what's interesting is that Duchamp has titled this work in this way, as though he is doing what I was suggesting Rauschenberg was doing with de Kooning, as though almost we get a phrasing of the two artists, Rauschenberg and de Kooning, each equally being able to say to the other, if we take this phrasing literally in its presentation, you blank me. I mean, you incomplete me, you, there's nothing, right? There's something missing. You, it's a verb, it's an action of withdrawal. You erase me, you, right? I mean, whatever. We don't know. It's left open. And so it's both incomplete and open-ended. We get in this painting painted versions of the shadows that we saw in the photograph, right? So again, shadows are indexes, right? They are indexes of traces of the negative, right, image or positive image that is cast onto a surface by light falling upon the front of an object and throwing its that object's shadow, that form, against another surface. And so Duchamp is painting those